Hi, greetings from beautiful Llama Island just off the coast of Hong Kong, where I'm currently in home quarantine. A couple of my friends have asked me to explain to them how I use Adobe's Lightroom software to catalog and develop my digital photographs. And instead of having long telephone conversations with them, I thought it would be interesting to make a video and explain the steps, and why not share it with the internet. I'm using two types of software. One is called Photo Mechanic, the other one is of course Lightroom, and you can find links to those two softwares in the description of this video. I'm going to be pulling the photographs that I'm using off my camera's SD card today, but this would work equally well if you have your pictures on a external hard drive or in a horrid jumble on your computer. We're going to be looking at my screen to do this, and why don't we just jump straight into it? Okay, welcome to the Matrix. This is the folder of photographs that I have already dragged off this SD card here, so we can check the SD card. I'm going to drag this folder of pictures down onto Photo Mechanic, which is this little cog thing here on my dock. And this is the grid of images that Photo Mechanics displays. Over on the left, we've got various different locations on our hard drive. There, for instance, on the desktop is my folder. And over here we can see all of the images. Right now they're sorted by file name. If you want, you can sort them by capture time, which is very useful. So the oldest picture will be displayed first, and then the newest one will be displayed last. Okay. The way I want to do this is to double click and I get a bigger version. You can have an even bigger version if you come over here and click on this thing. Shows you just the photograph, which can be handy for editing. Let's make that smaller. But down here we see the sequence of shots that we've taken, which is also useful for particularly if you've got a lot of repetitions and you just want to get to the climax of a sequence. It's probably going to be the last shot that you took, or maybe the penultimate one. So that could be useful too. Over on the right here we have all of the details of when and how the photographs were taken, with what camera and lens and shutter speeds and things like that. That's not particularly interested in this program, but it can be useful just to know the date anyway of when they were taken. Right, so what we're going to do is we're going to choose, and the choosing is done by using the arrow keys on our keyboard. Press the right hand arrow key, we move forward like that. Left hand arrow key, we move back. And then to choose a shot that I want to keep, I'm just going to press a number, and in this case I'm going to press the number 1, and that's going to put this purple flash here by the photograph. I could press a number 2, get a different colored flash, so if you really want to be fancy and do a keep and then the next one's a maybe, you could do that. I don't do that, it's too complicated. So I'm just going to go with keeps in this case, and they're going to get a purple flash. So let's just rapidly go through this, and you can see why this program is so good. It doesn't take any time to render the photograph, so you see it straight away, which is great. And you move very, very quickly as you want to press the button between the pictures, which is also very good. That's why Photo Mechanic, for this choosing part of the process and moving around and renaming, is such a good program. Okay, here we go. Let's just get in here. I'm going to just hit the ones that I like, and if I did change my mind, for instance, don't want this one, I'm going to hit a 0, and that will take the color flash away. Keep moving through. Mysterious. Okay. And I'm pretty generous when I edit. I tend to keep anything I'm undecided about. I'm going to hang on to, because in a couple of months' time, when I'm no longer as invested in these images, I may change my mind. 2-3 months' time, I'm going to forget that it was hard work walking to the place where I took these pictures, or it was very cold, or you know, whatever it was that I, you know, circumstantially had to deal with to get the photograph will have diminished in importance, and the pure quality of the image will be what I'm editing. So generally speaking, when I do this first pass, I'm just pretty generous because I might change my mind later. Okay. Okay, here we go. That's all looking quite similar. Nice detail. Ooh, lovely sun star down there, look at that. Okay, and you can see the aperture I shot this on to get the sun star. f13 over here, that's why that sun star is so spiky. If we go to a, let's see, we go to a wider aperture, f5.6, you see it's a softer sun star. Can be useful to see some of this stuff. Okay, right, that's it. We've gone around the block and we're back at the beginning. I'm going to double click now on the image, and you can see that some have got purple flashes underneath them and some haven't. Let's sort now up here by color class. All of the images that I want to keep are on the top now, and the ones I don't want are at the bottom. All right, so let's shift click on the ones I want to get rid of. Click on the first one and then shift click on the last one. Now using quick keys is the way forward with all of these programs, and the quick key to delete is just Command delete, and those will all be moved to the trash. Right, now we have our pure selection. Now this is where we start to rename. Okay, so we're going to click on the first one, click on the last one, and then shift click on the last one, and then we're going to hit Command M, and that is where we're going to rename these photographs. I've already typed in over here Sussex Tree Walk. That's going to be the name of the file, and then I'm adding a sequence. The sequence, I can set the sequence, the number, if you will, over here, and this is already set. That's set to 31. We don't want that, so we'll reset it to 01. There we are. That's going to be the first number, and now we can rename these. Right, that's very quick and easy. Right, now we're going to also rename the folder that they're living in, because that's just too generic. So double click on the first picture, find out when we shot it. 2nd of March 2020. Okay. So now click on this, right click, rename. So 2020 is the first part, and then the month, 03, and then 02, the day that the first picture in the sequence was taken, and then when we shall go Sussex, let's say Country Walk, not Tree Walk, Country Walk, okay, Sussex Country Walk. And now that's the name of the folder. Right, the next step is going to be to move all of those into Lightroom. If I wanted to move this folder somewhere else, I could do so in this program, just by clicking and dragging this folder around, and that's useful too, but I'm not going to do that right now. What we'll do is we'll move the folder once we've dealt with it in Lightroom. Okay, so now select all the images, select all as Command A, and then click and drag them into Lightroom. And here we are in the Lightroom import dialog, and we'll come on to that in just a moment. Hang on a second, I missed a step. Let's cancel out of that. I've just remembered something I wanted to show you. Okay, if you look at these files, you can see that they are an ARW plus a JPEG. That means that's the RAW file and the JPEG. You may want to keep the JPEG, you may not. Generally, I don't want to keep the JPEG. In this case, the camera shot both. So I'm going to get rid of the JPEG, and I want to show you how I do that because it can be very helpful in this program. Let's go into the preferences, and then in the contact sheet section of the preferences, general second one is the contact sheet section. It says combined images into single thumbnail. We don't want that. Let's unclick that, hit OK. Hasn't done it yet. That's because it won't until it re-renders the page. So let's just hide Lightroom for a moment and pull this back into Photo Mechanic. And now you see they're separate. We've got the RAW file and the JPEG. Over here, we're going to sort by type. Now we have all the JPEGs at the top and all the RAW files down here at the bottom. Let's go halfway up. I clicked on the first JPEG, and here is the last JPEG. Shift click, Command delete. And there we are, goodbye JPEGs. That's some nice housekeeping done. Okay, let's pull these back into Lightroom. Command A to select them all, and now pull them into Lightroom. And there we go. Okay, so here we are in the import dialog of Lightroom. You can see all of the photographs that we want to bring in have little tick marks beside them. You can switch that off if you want. This is where the pictures are coming from, over here, source, and then file handling. I like to have a few things set up here. Build previews should be standard. That's a nice big preview that will help you quickly browse through the pictures later on in the library. This one is don't import suspected duplicates. Let's keep life simple. And then apply during import we have metadata, which is my name and details. You can set that up here. If you have a look at this edit presets, let's go to my name and details, one that I set up already. There's my name, copyright, and a way of people contacting me. If the pictures get out in the wild and they want to find out who took it, they can look at the metadata and they can get in touch, and that has actually happened, so it's worth doing. Over here, very important for searching in the future, let's apply some keywords. Where we shot the pictures, when, spring, let's do another one here, countryside, there we go, okay. And that's it. So we've got some general keywords, various other settings up there. Now we can import, okay. And they're going to come into the main body of Lightroom. This is the library section. This is where you can move the photographs around. The folders can be moved from place to place. I've got another external hard drive set up here. Ultimately, I will move this folder once I've done the development into this external hard drive, because I don't want to keep any photographs actually on my computer, as otherwise I would run out of memory quite quickly. So that's an important point. Here you can create collections of specific images. I already have a collection set up called clouds. Let's shift click on the cloud pictures and throw them into that. It's important to note you're not making duplicates when you move stuff around in Lightroom, which is a very good point. You're not eating up, as I said, the computer's memory. You're just assigning some kind of instructions associated with the file in the Lightroom catalog. Speaking of catalogs, to make a new catalog of pictures, you come up here, you hit New Catalog, or you can open an old catalog. I have a number of different catalogs here that I've used in the past. This one is Lightroom How To, just for the sake of this tutorial. Some people like to have one massive catalog going with thousands and thousands of pictures in it, or you could do specific catalogs for particular jobs. This isn't a very high-powered computer, and usually I'll open a new catalog for a particular project. But on my desktop in my studio, I have one large catalog going back many years for my main photo library. So it's up to you how you want to do that. Let's put a few more keywords on these, and that happens over on the right-hand side here. So for our searching purposes, these are selected already. Let's do clouds, and most of these images are of trees because I love trees. Okay, there we go. Let's do trees. And what else have we got? Command D to deselect. Let's just select the ones of this gorse bush. We're going to type in gorse. So imagine in 10 years' time I want to find a picture of a gorse bush, and I know I've shot one in the past. I don't know when, I don't know where. If I want to search it up, let's go search all the photographs in this catalogue, only 30, so it won't be too difficult. Hit text up here. This is where we search for things, and we'll type in the word gorse. And it will miraculously find the pictures that have the gorse keyword in them. So you can see that's extremely useful. So that's how we search for things. You can also search by rating. If you've rated or added color flashes in this program to your pictures, or you could use metadata. You could search by the camera you shot with and the lens you shot with. So this is a great search engine. We hit none and we go back to the grid view without any searching. If you do want to rate your pictures, there are a couple of different ways. You can apply a star rating right onto the photograph here, or you could use the stars here and all the ones you've selected would have stars applied. You can spray things like color labels or even ratings straight onto your pictures if you want with the spray can. That's quite handy. If you want to sort the pictures, let's say we want to see the ones with a color label, the red ones are going to be at the top. Or you can use this filter over here. Let's say we want to look at only the ones with 3 stars. That's another way of sorting your shots depending on how you rated them, if that's something you want to do. I generally don't do that a great deal. When I'm working, I find it very handy to use these collections. You know, start a new collection and switch that off. Let's call the collection trees, create the collection, and then select all of the great tree shots I want. One thing you can do down here is you can use the spray can. Let's go the spray can to target a collection. Okay? And then it will put your pictures up in this quick collection here. And then what you can do is you can drag them, get out of the spray can, drag them down into your collection. That could be a very fast way of creating a collection. So that's a little bit to do with collections and ratings. We've done keywords. What else is going on over here? You can adjust your images, if you like, very quickly in this software. Oh, another thing here is if you hit E, you go to an exploded view, enlarged view. G, you go back to the grid. So in E, you can see we made this a bit brighter. You can jack up the contrast. That looks terrible. Let's undo that, which is Command Z. Command Z. And in fact, if I want to, I can just reset everything to do with the picture down here too. But I rarely use this. I use the develop module for doing most things to do with making the pictures brighter, darker, etc. And with that in mind, let's have a look at the develop module right now. This is the develop module, not looking too dissimilar from the library module where we just were. This is going to be something of a shallow dive because There's a lot going on in this program, and I'm not going to cover every single aspect of it, but I'm really just going to focus on the things that I use a lot. First of all, the layout. We've got a panel on the left, a panel on the right. This is where history is, and that's important to me, so I'm going to keep this panel open. You can, just as in the library section, close these if you want to. I don't really need to see the sequence of images, so I'm going to get rid of that, and that gives me some useful real estate for the photograph. And then over here, this is where the action is. These are all the control panels for adjusting the look of your image. You can set all of these up in the order that you find most useful by right-clicking on here, customizing develop panel, and then as you can see, you can move these around. I've got them set up the way that I most frequently interact with them, so the most useful ones I have at the top and the least useful at the bottom. And then there's another thing here called solo mode. If you click on one of the panels, they only open one at a time. You click on this one, it's open, click on the next, it closes, and then that one is open, as you can see. So this helps if you don't have a big screen to work on, which I don't in this case. I generally have this on even on my big desktop. Let's start with the first and most important panel, the basic panel. Adobe's got this set up with the various different controls descending in the order that they, I think, expect you to use them. Up here we've got Profile, Adobe Color. Adobe Color used to be flat and rather boring. In recent iterations of this software, they have made it look much, much better. So for the most part, I don't change that, actually. If you wanted to, you could come down here, Browse, and you could find your cameras. Where is it? Where are the cameras ones? Cameras versions of the color profile. Here's the standard one that Sony would have used. I shot this with a Sony camera. However, I don't really think there's much point in changing it from Adobe Color, which is in fact quite similar. So I don't generally now get involved with changing the profile that much. Here we have temperature. Now you're going to see how badly wrong things can go if you adjust these sliders too much. Ooh, very blue, very yellow. The sliders take a delicate touch. Let's move this across, and the sliders will become more sensitive because they're moving over a greater area. I think the warmth and look of this is okay. Down here you've got, you can make it more green if you want, or more pink. Don't want to do that. I mean, often you will want to do these things, and sometimes maybe there'll be a grey area or a white area in the shot, and you can use this pipette and you can just click on a grey or a white to make that neutral. That's very useful. Also, you can let Lightroom have a go at making the color of the image perfect. Not much change, so I guess that it thought I did a good job. Over here is the history. As I mentioned before, this allows you to go back in time. We'll just go one step back, and we'll go to get rid of this auto white balance. This is useful if you go down the wrong turn and you need to get back in time. The history is going to be all here for you, and you can do that. Next up, we've got exposure. This is the first thing that I usually adjust, and I'm looking for a good looking histogram here that correctly portrays the detail in the image. The histogram is a visual representation of the photons that you have managed to capture when you've taken your picture. On the left-hand side, the dark areas of the photograph. On the right-hand side, the bright areas. An image like this, which is kind of an average image, should have a histogram that looks more like a pyramid, like that. If we move the exposure slider, you'll see that the hill, in this case, is going to move to the right. And that's probably pretty good. Another way of moving the histogram, which I really like, is to grab on the histogram and just move it around, right on the histogram. If we move the highlights up and get that blue sky looking about right, and sorry, not the highlights, the midtones, that's this exposure slider, we can then grab on this part. You see the word change down here where it says ISO 100. We're now going to go up here, and it goes to highlights, exposure, shadows, blacks, whites. Grab on the highlights area, dial that back a bit so they're not quite so glaring. And I think that's quite nicely adjusted. Once again, you can, if you want, let Lightroom have a go at doing it for you automatically. Let's click the auto button, and I just don't like that at all. It just looks way too colorful, way too saturated. Lightroom invariably pushes up the shadows as well, which I think is horrible. The human eye isn't designed to be able to see clearly into shadows. That is why we are afraid of the dark. It deals with highlights very well, so you can adjust the highlights quite often as much as you like, but adjusting the shadows you need to be very careful with. Let's go back in the history, take that auto to off, and just quickly have a look at some of these others down here. And I think you get the idea. You move the shadows, you can see into the shadows more. Let's choose an image with a lot of shadows, actually. In fact, let's develop an image that's a bit more contrasty. Let's do this one. Develop. Okay, moving the shadows up, all of a sudden you can see into the shadows. If you brighten up an image a lot, you're going to get a lot of this kind of crunchy, grainy look. You can get rid of that by coming down here to detail and using the noise reduction. Slide it up a little bit. Luminance noise. Color noise is a kind of patchy noise, different blotches of color. You don't often see that in this day and age of sensor technology. Usually the only one you're going to need to adjust is this luminance one, and sometimes if I really brightened up an image and created a lot of grain, I will adjust this. In this case, I don't actually want all of that detail in the foreground because it's kind of lowering the drama and the contrast of my image. So let's bring these shadows back down to something just a little bit more subtle. You can pick out this gate now. Overall, I think the brightness of this image is okay. Might make it a bit darker, bring the shadows up a tiny bit. This is an image where we can perhaps get a little bit more color happening. It's a sunset. So let's come down here to vibrance. Move that up a bit. You see the blues becoming a bit bluer. You can see I only do this subtly. And then saturation, which works pretty well on reds and oranges. Let's make that sun look a little bit more intense. Okay. I think that looks pretty good in general. I didn't mention sharpening. Unless you're going to make a big print, I don't really see the point of doing a lot of sharpening. If this picture is going to be displayed on a screen or on a phone, no one's going to know how, well, no one's going to need to see it, immaculately sharpened. For printing, you may want to do some sharpening. I won't get involved with that here because it's quite complicated. Generally speaking, I'm not adding any sharpening. What else do we have? Just back in the basic panel. I think that's it. Oh no, there are some dangerous ones here. Let's have a look at texture. This is an area with a lot of little details. Let's fire up the texture slider. You see how the detail becomes more crunchy. Once again, I think you have to ask yourself, what is the point if the picture isn't being viewed very, very large. Sometimes with surfaces like rock or sand, the texture slider might be something worth adjusting. Another one that's very dangerous, clarity. A lot of people think to themselves, I want my picture to look clearer. Makes sense, right? But in fact, if you use this too much, your picture will just look really fake and bad and crunchy looking. We don't like that. Let's put it back to 0. Another one is dehaze. Dehaze can be useful. It does what it says on the tin. It gets rid of haze or smog or pollution in the air. Dial it down a bit and you see it's just going to saturate the sky slightly. Once again, use it carefully. Otherwise you can go very, very wrong. Okay, next panel, transform. This is for adjusting edges that aren't straight on buildings. The effect when you look up at a building and it appears to be tilting backwards. That, I don't have a picture of buildings with non-straight edges here, so I'm a bit stuck, but auto is a good place to start, or vertical, and your buildings will straighten up. Tone curve, I quite often use this point curve just to add, if I've done a lot of adjusting and my picture's looking a bit flat and bland, I'll hit medium contrast just to bring it back and make it look more real. We don't need to do that here because it's pretty contrasty already. Lens corrections. I have a guest star image to help us look at this. Let's bring this in. Okay, lens corrections. If you're shooting with a lens that isn't very well corrected for anomalies of color and this shading in the corners, which is called vignetting, using the lens corrections area can be quite useful. Let's click on Enable Profile Corrections. You see the shading goes away, and there's a thing called chromatic aberration, and that will largely go away as well. You can see that the program knows what lens I used, and it's adjusted the image accordingly. Let's zoom in. Now there's something here. This is the chromatic aberration that it mentions up here. That's a kind of green and pink edging, particularly on transitions between light and dark. If we click on Remove Chromatic Aberration, Lightroom will attempt to get rid of it. It's done a pretty good job actually. You see, the tonality is still there, but the color's gone. If you are having trouble getting rid of it fully, you can go over to Manual here, use the pipette, click on the green, click on the pink, and you can get rid of it that way. You can go badly wrong with this. If you click on the wrong color, it can all come back. So that's something you need to use quite carefully, but it's very, very useful for getting rid of that. That is something also that you're not really going to see unless you blow the picture up very big. Split toning we'll come to in a minute. Effects. Let's go back to our grid and choose an image. Let's choose an image with some sky in it. And we'll see some of these effects. So the effects, you can actually add vignetting if you want. Darken up your corners. Bring the darkness into the middle. This is obviously extremely exaggerated. Make this shape more round or more square. I generally don't use this, but it's there if that is something you want to try. And then the other thing here is grain. Now this can be useful, once again, if you're making a print and you have areas that are very smooth, sometimes the printer will create banding in these areas. Banding is weird tonal transitions because the printer doesn't have any any detail in these areas to print and it gets confused. So if you want to add some grain, now the printer has something to kind of hang on to and you won't get the banding. So adding grain can be useful. I mean, adding grain can be a artistic effect as well if you're doing a black and white conversion. Okay, that mostly covers off on the right hand panel. Let's just go back to this image, develop. Up here we have some tools. One is crop. It's pretty self-explanatory. And it gives you the opportunity to choose some standard sizes if you want. 1:1 is, something we know well from Instagram. Yeah, there's also dust removal. Dust removal can be quite useful. By the way, if you're in a tool and you hit the space bar, it goes to the zoom in and move tool, which is handy. Okay, bear in mind I've got the cursor red circle on. The circle that you want to be looking at is the one that's slightly outside the red one. Now, this splotch here, zoom out, up here is dust on my sensor. And this dust removal tool is very useful when you've got a piece of dust on a smooth area. It will remove it for you. It doesn't do well when there's a lot of detail around, it gets confused, but smooth areas, it takes it away very nicely. Red eye reduction tool, pretty obvious. These are graduated filters. Let's zoom out of the image and have a look at these. You can drag a filter effect, press H and you'll see the lines that you're adding onto your image to brighten up. In this case it's brightening, it must be what I did last time I used it, or darken down. So if you had a very bright sky and a shadowy foreground, this is the classic reason for using graduated filters, this can be quite useful. We don't actually want it for this shot. If you hit delete, it will disappear. There's a circular version where you can drag, once again hit H if you can't see the shape, you can drag the effect of the filter, graduated filter, onto your image and it's going to be circular. You can see we've got the look of vignetting here. But there are other things you could do. You can adjust the contrast just around the filter, highlights, all of the things that were in the basic panel you can adjust. Let's get rid of it again. Hit delete and it will disappear. Okay, so the final one is this brush tool, and the brush tool lets you make local adjustments. See the track marks in the sky? That's brightening up the sky. We don't want that actually, but that's very handy as well. If, for instance, perhaps you wanted to, say, brighten up just a particular part of the foreground. Let's do this. Let's zero this out, and for the sake of illustration, let's brighten up these shadows here, but just there. Okay, that's something that you can do with the brush tool. Let's undo that. Right. Okay, last thing I want to quickly show you is how I do black and white conversions, because I enjoy them, but it also shows how you might create, say, a special portfolio of shots. So what we're going to do here, in the grid mode, press G, make a selection of a few images, and then come over here to collections, click plus, create collection. Now instead of, let's name it, this is going to be black and white trees. Say I wanted to do an exhibition of black and white trees. I'm going to make new virtual copies. So I'm going to make copies. These are virtual, they're not real, they're not using up a lot of space on your computer, of these images. And those virtual copies are now going to be here in this collection. Now I can adjust these and do anything I want to them, and I'm not going to be changing the look of the original. You know it's a copy because it's got this little fold over bit next to it. That's the original, that's the copy. Okay, so in here what we can do is go into develop, and let's immediately go to the basic panel, and we'll change this to black and white. Adobe monochrome. It does quite a good job of converting to black and white right off the bat, but here we've got a few things that I didn't touch on before. Black and white conversions and split toning. Split toning allows you to make your picture look, say for instance, more sepia. So if we move this up, let's put in a numerical value of 38 there, and then move the saturation up, you're going to see the picture going a more brownish colour, more classic kind of sepia look. And then for the shadows we'll do the same thing, 38, and bring that up. Split toning was a process used in the darkroom to create more contrast between shadows and highlights. Typically, and quite often what you'd do is you'd tone your shadows blue and your highlights keep them warm, and you would get this kind of look and feel. I never particularly liked it. I think just straightforward toning like that is better. Now if you hit balance, once you've done it, you can dial it back a little bit, the overall look, if you wish. I say that, but it doesn't seem to be doing a lot to this image. Okay, we've got a look and a feel for our first image. Now, should you want to create a portfolio where they all have that toning, shift click, select them all, and now we can do something very important in Lightroom. We can sync our settings. Come over here, you could sync everything about a picture, the crop, lens corrections, brightness, darkness, but we don't want to do that in this case. We're going to check none, and we're just going to go treatment, black and white mix, and split toning. And all of those photographs are now the same black and white look and feel. If we select this one and we come in, hit develop, and we go to this black and white panel, this is a black and white mix, and when it's mixing and creating the black and white image, it decides, you know, what tone the sky is going to be, what tone the white trees are going to be. And in the case of the blue sky, we have got something that we can do here. Remembering the blue sky is blue, if we click on this adjuster and bring it over and have it hover over the blue and then click and drag downwards, the blue sky is going to get darker. You can see here, black and white mix, it's got darker. Once again, another opportunity for Lightroom to have a try. Don't love that very much. Command Z. One thing that can happen when you do this, you zoom in, sometimes around high contrast edges you're going to see some artifacts, but we don't have that problem here. So just be careful if you do it a lot. Make your sky super dark like this. You see sometimes you get these strange kind of posterized edges. Let's undo that. Okay. And then zoom back out. So, and that you see has created some kind of dramatic contrast. Let's go back to our grid. So that's how you can create a look and feel across many images. Let's just develop this one a bit for fun. just to remind ourselves how to develop. Let's go up into the histogram here, make this a little bit brighter. In general, something like that. I want to keep the mood. See, these blacks are super black down here. Let's see what happens if we just push up the shadows a touch. I think that's nicer. Okay. One thing also in black and white that you need to consider is that you can be much more radical in your adjustments and it still look okay. Right, I think for the most part that is the story of Develop. The final thing I'm going to do is show you how to set up exporting the images, and we'll do that now. Okay, let's get these photographs out of Lightroom and into the wild. Let's select all, come up to File, hit Export, or you could do Shift Command E, and we get this window to deal with. We're going to export to a specific folder. I've already set up a folder on my desktop, but if I wanted to, I could choose a different folder here. Perhaps Dropbox would be a good one, and then I could send someone a Dropbox link. Coming down, I'm not renaming the files, and there are no videos, so we don't need to worry about that. File settings. 9 times out of 10, the world is looking for a JPEG, and the color space is going to be sRGB. That's the standard color space, so it will look good on phones and other people's monitors. For a JPEG, I generally leave the quality at 70. If someone asks me for a high quality JPEG, a full resolution file, I will not resize it when I export it. I'll send them a resolution, a 300 DPI file at the full resolution that the sensor captured in the camera. If I want to send a photograph that's smaller, however, say I want to send something for Instagram, I'm going to resize the image. I'm going to have this window set to long edge, and then the number of pixels on the long edge I'm going to have set to 1000. That's a good size for Instagram. This doesn't matter so much now because I'm sending an absolute number of pixels. If I want to send a client a somewhat better looking file but still not too big, something that they could look at on their desktop, I'm going to send them a 2000 pixel file. So those are the 3 sizes of JPEG. Full size, that box is not checked. Good for a desktop, 2000 pixels. Good for Facebook or Instagram, 1000 pixels. The other size that a client might want, or would usually be a printer or a book designer, someone like that, they might ask for a TIFF file. So in that case, I would give them a TIFF, and then I would discuss what they wanted here. Do they want an sRGB file, or maybe something with more color, a wider color gamut, Adobe RGB or Pro Photo RGB? Do they want a 16-bit file that has more variation in the colors? It's also twice the size of an 8-bit file. So those are questions I would ask the designer, and we would figure that out together. But as I said, usually it's a JPEG, and today I plan to post these pictures on Instagram. So this is the size that I want. Coming down here, we have metadata. Well, sharpening is first. I'm not going to sharpen the pictures. I never use this output sharpening. I'm only ever going to sharpen specifically in Lightroom for prints. Metadata that's going to go out with the file, I'm going to say all metadata. That's going to include my name and details and contact information. If it's a picture that's going on the internet, I'm not sending out a high resolution photograph, so I'm not going to mess up the photograph with a watermark, although sometimes that might be useful. And post-processing, after export, do nothing. That's it. Okay, so off the files go. And once these have exported, I'm going to take the final step, and that is to take this folder, this Sussex Country Walk, and move it off my desktop so it doesn't eat up my computer's memory, and put it on this external hard drive. Now this is moving the entire folder. It won't be on the desktop anymore. It will be in this external hard drive, and all of the photographs will then be accessible to me in this part of the library window now, under this external hard drive. But everything I did is saved, and here are all of my the virtual copies that I made for this black and white trees collection, and everything is still there. So that is the export done, and the folders moved, and the task complete.
So, I hope that proved useful. I hope your photo library is neat and tidy, and that your digital pictures are looking better than ever. If you have any questions, please let me know, and thank you very much for watching.